What do you do immediately you're done studying? Probably you pick up your phone and check social media to check the YouTube video I've always wanted to watch, or you play games or whatever it is. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that after studying because you earned it. You have spent your time studying and there should be some form of relaxation. What I'm saying is do this instead. So there are three forms of memory that we have in our brain, three forms by which our brain processes information that we put into it. First is the short-term memory, the working memory, and the long-term memory. Short-term memory deals with the sensory inputs that we have from our various sense organs. So like our eyes, our ears, and different sense organs that we can feel, those are stored under the short-term memory. Then we have the working memory. Now, this is the memory that we employ when we want to study something. Let's say we're studying physics, for example, and we are trying as much as possible to grasp the concepts that have been explained in that chapter of physics. Working memory is what is at play. When we are done studying, the working memory is not a suitable place to keep information. Our brain needs time to be able to process the working memory into the long-term memory, because that's what we would use when we're in exam settings or having our form of retrieval practices in terms of past question marks. But when we then finish our studying and the memory or the information we have put into our memory is stored in the working memory, a wrong approach is to try as much as possible to fill in the information back into that working memory, because there's a limit to what it can actually hold. Research has shown that working memory has a capacity of 7 or plus or minus 2, which means it can have either 9 or 5, which if you have 9, you have a very high working memory, which means you have a very high processing power as well. So when we pick up our phones or we pick up various screens or do activities that feeds another form of sensory information into our working memory, what happens is that working memory doesn't have the opportunity to be transferred into long-term memory. We pick up our phones to watch YouTube, to scroll through social media, while feeding our brain with a lot of memory, picking it up from our sensory memory, which is our short-term memory, and conflicting it with the working memory as well. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, what then is the solution? The solution is this. Immediately you are done studying, you need to give your brain the time it needs to be able to process the information that you have placed in the working memory into the long-term memory. And how do you do that? Very simple. If you were part of my webinar, I spoke about a process called the Pavlovian conditioning. And if you're not part of the webinar, you can always join. The link is in the description box. But I only spoke about using the principle of breath work at the beginning of a study routine or a study time. Now I'm going to explain more deeply by talking about breath work after the study time. Now, you need a breath work that involves the closing of your eyes, because the eyes is one of the primary input of sensory memory, which is also called the short-term memory. And the eyes is also one of the major sense organs that our brain depends on for input. So any form of activity that you are going to do at least 5 to 10 minutes after studying should involve the closing of the eye. Now, there are various practices you can do. The one I love personally is what is called the non-sleep deep rest routine, which is NSDR. And it's also called Yoga Nidra. You can also check it out on YouTube. Open your YouTube app and search NSDR or Yoga Nidra. I will link a particular video that I love to use in the description box below. NSDR routine involves you closing your eyes and concentrating as much as possible, getting to be able to process the working memory into the long-term memory. Another routine you can do is to stare at your wall. I know I said that you need to close your eyes because of a lot of inputs that comes from your brain. But staring at a wall does two things. One, it keeps your focus on that spot. Two, our brain finds it boring. And it gets to a point where by staring at that wall becomes a blurred activity. We don't register it anymore. It spreads focus. And we need that activity. To recap, I said whenever you're done with your studying routine or your study time, do not pick up your phones or do not do any activity that involves you picking up information from your environment, from the short-term memory into your working memory, which then conflicts with the working memory. And that is why you then have periods whereby you will not be able to remember things you have learned. A particular interesting study carried out an experiment. This group of students were allowed to go through a wakeful rest, and another group of students, immediately are done studying with one material, moved straight into another material. They noticed that at the beginning or at the point of experimenting, there wasn't much difference in terms of understanding. But in the long-term effects, then there were much difference. Just 1 week was enough to cause a very massive or huge difference between the gap of remembrance of what they have learned.